Welcome to the Chasing Spirituality podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and I'm so excited that you're joining me today. Each episode is full of heartfelt and expansive content that will really help you expand your consciousness and grow as a person. I created this podcast because I wanted to share my own personal experiences on my spiritual journey, but I also wanted to meet others and have them share what they've been through and how they've gotten to where they are today. If you haven't done so already, it would really mean a lot to me if you could rate and review the podcast. This really helps the podcast grow and reach more people, but it also allows me to get more guests on the show. Now on to today's topic. Hello everybody, welcome back. If you are a frequent listener, I'm excited that you're here because this is our 100th episode of Chasing Spirituality, and so I am recording this impromptu episode because as I was recording my manifestation episode, which will actually come out next week, I did not realize that it was my 100th episode. And I was like, no, I have got to do something special, something honoring the fact that I have came on this platform and have recorded 100 times. Like that to me is just such a big milestone. That is so incredible, and I'm really proud of myself for sticking to this for as long as I have, because that's not always what I do. I have like what I like to call shiny object syndrome, and it's where I will find something that I find super interesting or super fascinating, and I will do like a deep dive. I will give it 100% effort. I will work, and then the interest starts to slowly fade, and I find or see something else that I want to do or see or whatever, like I don't always follow things through till they're finished. So the fact that I have actually recorded 100 episodes, that's a really big accomplishment for me, and it says a lot about what I enjoy, and that this must really be a platform that really inspires me and really lights me up. Otherwise I would not still be doing it. So I wanted to come on here and really talk about the 100th episode and the accomplishment of that. But I also wanted to come on here and say thank you to all of my listeners and supporters. You have no idea how much it truly means to me that you follow me and you follow this podcast and you share it with friends and you share the messages, because I put a lot of my heart and a lot of my soul into these episodes, and sometimes it's been hard, sometimes it's hard being vulnerable and kind of putting yourself out there, saying what you believe, what you think, when you know that not everyone is going to feel the same way. Because even though I'm a really open-minded person and I don't judge anyone based on their beliefs, and I have a space for anyone at my table, not everyone else is the same way. So it's been a really scary process as well. I've had to do a lot of growth. I've had to give myself a lot of tough love and reality checks and call myself out when I wasn't being super authentic. And that's also why you have seen differences in me in this show. If you've been a listener since the beginning, or you've gone back and you've listened to some of my earlier episodes, like you can definitely see my growth and my journey that I've taken along this podcast. And in a way, sometimes this platform has really been kind of like my journal, kind of like my diary, or my timeline, so that I could go, unintentionally go back and actually hear the growth in my voice and see myself step into a higher level of authenticity and vibration that I never thought was possible. And so I hope that as you listen to episodes and as you listen to some of the older episodes, that you can see that as well, and you can see how much I have changed and grown just from allowing myself to be vulnerable and put myself out there. And it really is rewarding. And one of the things that I say a lot I probably said it in previous episodes, is when I do things that are out of my comfort zone, when I do things that I find scary or that I'm afraid of, the universe always has a way of rewarding me. And I've noticed that the more authentic I get on this platform and the more I try to make sure I stay true to myself and my message and not copy other influencers or not try to be anyone else, because it's so easy to fall into that trap of, oh, well, this person does it this way, and this person runs their podcast this way, and this person has 10 million viewers or 10 million subscribers or 10 million listeners. So they must be doing something right. I must be doing something wrong. It's so easy to fall into that trap. And I myself have been victim of that. Well, I wouldn't say victim because I don't like to be a victim, but I have allowed myself to fall into those kind of thinking patterns, especially in the beginning of this podcast, where I thought I needed to do things a certain way so that I could attract certain listeners. But as this podcast has grown, I have grown and I've allowed myself to change, and I've allowed myself to let some of those false beliefs fall away. And it's allowed me to really step into my true self and the message that I really want to bring and the teachings that I want to share with the world. And ever since then, my podcast has grown, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And listeners like you, I'm sure, can really appreciate me being vulnerable, and that's why I'm attracting you. And I have this saying that I tell people that are influencers, or they are trying to build a community or a business. I tell them there's a million other Gabrielle Bernstein's out there. There's a million other Ram Dass's out there. There's a million other Eckhart Tolle's out there. Like, there's all these people out there that are following other influencers and trying to be, kind of follow their path or be like them. And the people that resonate with them are going to find them. They're not going to find the knockoffs. They're not going to find the fakes. So if you want to attract your people, your tribe, your friends, your community, your followers, you've got to be yourself, because there's people out there that are going to resonate with you. They're going to resonate with your word, with your vibration, with your truth. And until you can get comfortable in owning that, expressing that, standing in that, then you're not going to attract your right people. You're going to attract people that are actually attracted to someone else. And you can apply this to any part of your life. And once I realized that really allowed me to let go of some of those fears and some of those false behaviors so that I could be authentic. And so I hope that as you've listened to this show, you continue to see my growth, and you continue to see the healing and the clarity that I get, as well as what I'm trying to provide for you guys as a resource as well. And I'm so glad that you come back every week, and I'm so thankful for your presence and your messages and your insights, and just the way that this community has grown. It's really moving, and it really does mean the world to me. I love going and seeing that you guys have shared certain posts, you've liked and commented on things. I love going back and reading the reviews. The reviews, those mean the world to me. And whether that's a review for my service or a review for the podcast, I love both. And I also just really appreciate that. I appreciate that you share this with people that you know would benefit from these messages, because that's how communities grow. Communities like the one I've started, they grow by word of mouth. And so when you tell someone that, you really liked this podcast, or you really liked this service, or I really inspired you in some way with whatever tool that was, and then they go and then they share, and then they go and they share, like, that's how we find the people that are meant to be with us. That's how we find our community. That's how we find our tribe. And that's what I've always wanted. I've always wanted to build a safe community that can provide people with education, with empowerment, with the tools that they can use to heal themselves, that they can use to discover who they are. So this podcast has given me that, and I cannot be more incredibly thankful for it. Because it's the 100th episode, I also just want to kind of go over my story really briefly again. It's been a while since I've done a story episode where I talk about my journey from the beginning. So I'm going to kind of skim over that, touch on the highlights, so that any of the new listeners, if you don't feel like going back and listening to every episode, then it's right here. It's right here, and you can listen to it now. So I'm not going to go deep diving into each thing. So if at any point I do talk about something that you would like a little bit more information on, just send me a message. And when we do that Q&A episode, which I'm planning on doing in a couple weeks, I can answer some of the questions about that, unless it's worthy of a full-length episode. But if you haven't sent any questions in, you can send those to me to my email, chasingspirituality@yahoo.com. You could also send those to me through my website. There is a way to contact me through there, or you can message me them on Instagram, chasing.spirituality. I had like a little post up about sending messages in for the Q&A, and I do plan to go ahead and answer all the questions that I've gotten thus far within the next couple weeks. So if you haven't sent yours in, go ahead and do that so you can be on the Q&A episode. And I won't mention your name or anything like that, just for privacy reasons, so you don't have to worry about that. But so my journey, I've always been spiritual, but for a really long time I kind of disconnected from that. But as a kid, I was a super spiritual kid. I was definitely like that woo-woo weird kid that didn't fit in. I felt like the black sheep. I wasn't like any of my friends. I wasn't like any of my family. I also didn't get a lot of support from my family. I was raised by alcoholic addicts, and they did not give me a lot of love and attention. I was oftentimes sent to a grandparent's house or a friend's house or something like that so that they could party and they could do their own thing. However, when I was at home, they didn't give me a lot of attention, and they fought all the time. They had a very, very toxic relationship, and they were very abusive to each other, and this was very frightening for me. So I grew up in a very fearful home, and from that I developed the attachment style fearful. Actually, it's disorganized. I have a disorganized attachment style. So if you know anything about attachment styles, then that's kind of where I fall into that spectrum. But I also, because I wasn't given love and affection and attention, I also grew up with this feeling of unworthiness, feeling of not being good enough, and that I had to constantly prove myself. So I would either shut down and not care who loved me or cared about me, or I would fall into this fearful pattern where I felt like I had to be absolutely perfect for anyone to give me love. And my spiritual stuff, I would talk, my dad passed away when I was very young. He passed away when I was 5. And so at night I would stay up and I would pray to him, and I would talk to him, and I would tell him about my life, and I would tell him how my mom was doing, and I would just tell him all these things, right? And I would do that to other loved ones like that had passed, and I didn't think anything about it. Like, this was absolutely natural for me. This was normal for me. So I never second guessed it. But where comes the good comes the bad, and I had some scary experiences as a kid that I couldn't really explain. I didn't really know how to handle them because no one taught me boundaries with spirit. No one taught me that I have control and that I can tell any spirit that makes me uncomfortable to leave me alone. And so having some scary experiences growing up really made me want to shut that part off. Not to mention, I was also extremely empathic and absorbing emotions of everyone around me. And I was around a lot of bad people. I was around a lot of people that didn't have the best emotions or the best intentions. And this also really frightened me, and it scared me because, I'm a little kid. Like, I don't understand why somebody has this immense anger or these really just bad emotions. And so because of that, I shut off my gifts slowly but surely over time. I did get involved in spooky culture for a little bit. I was obsessed with scary movies, obsessed with scary stories. I loved Tales from the Crypt. I loved all the spooky stuff. So I did let my spiritual side kind of turn into spooky, and that only furthered the fear that I had. I would act tough and I would act brave and act like I wasn't scared of spirits and ghosts and stuff, but I really was. And so this kind of just reinforced that spirit is spooky. And because of that, I grew further and further apart from my gifts. And over time, I grew further and further apart from my intuition as well, because since I had that immense feeling of, low self-esteem, and I didn't trust myself, well, I definitely wasn't going to trust my intuition then. So just over time, this kind of separated more and more and more until I was in my 20s. And when I was in my 20s, it started to resurface. And I'm sure that every time I think back on this, there's always more information that comes through that I'm like, oh my gosh, Spirit was communicating with me and I just wasn't aware of it. And that happens to a lot of people as well. You'll as you go further along your journey, you'll start to have flashbacks or memories come back up that are like, oh wow, that actually did happen and I just didn't realize it was happening. And so this happens to me all the time. But let's just say I started going through a dark night of the soul. And during this time, I got really, really depressed. And I didn't like who I was. I didn't like my life. I didn't like the way things were going. And I didn't really know why. And this was after I had a few kind of spirit moments where I felt like I heard someone say my name. And I talked about this, I think, on my Halloween episode. So you've probably heard those stories before. But just little encounters like that I hadn't allowed myself to have out of fear for years. I just blocked it out. So I started having those again, and then I went through my dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul, I just got really depressed and really down, and didn't want to be around anybody. And at this point, I just started really looking internally and asking myself, what is going on? What is wrong with me? Why am I so depressed? Why do I hate myself so much? Why am I doing these things and being around these people if I don't care? And slowly but surely, I just started to see the light. It was instead of me staying in that fear, staying in that self-hatred, I started to be illuminated, and I was able to have awareness around, well, that's not your true self. That's not how you really feel. You have to get to the bottom of it. And as I did, I just started to treat myself better. I started to acknowledge my feelings. I started to call myself out when I was having certain thoughts and ask myself, are these real? Is this really me? I started to really uncover the limiting beliefs and the inner child wounds, and facing them and saying, I don't want to believe this anymore. And as I was doing that, I also started meditating. I also started getting into crystals. And I actually dove in through the witchcraft side of it, because I was still so adverse to talking about God and religion from religious trauma. So I actually had an introduction through witchcraft, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. But then every time I would look into witchcraft, it wasn't giving me that spiritual tug that I knew was there. And so I started digging a little bit deeper, and that's when I discovered spirituality, more new age, modern spirituality stuff. And I started listening to podcasts that were talking about growth and inner development and self-reflection. And I just went down this huge rabbit hole of everything. I looked into astrology. I looked into numerology. I looked into tarot. I created my grimoire, or my book of shadows, that had all of the information in it of everything I've learned so far. And I just literally became this sponge, and I started soaking up all of this knowledge from all of these different concepts and healing modalities and spiritual topics. And I loved it. But I still had so many questions. And so I started writing my questions down, and I started channeling the information for what that really meant, or how that really worked. And then I started doing more and more research. And then after a little while of doing that, I had a Kundalini awakening. My Kundalini awakening went all the way to my crown. And so I had this massive blissful experience where I had complete oneness with everything. And unless you've experienced this, it's really difficult to explain. I cannot fathom the feelings that I had after this Kundalini awakening. But it is immense bliss. There's absolutely nothing in the entire world that I've ever experienced that meets this. This was the most, it was ecstasy. It was the most incredible I've ever felt. And I just had this intense inner knowing of who I really was, of who my soul was, and that nothing else mattered. And so that lasted for a couple months, and I continued to research, and I continued to fill myself with all of this knowledge of things that I wanted in my life. And after some time, I decided to create the podcast because I thought, well, if I'm going through this awakening and I don't know what's going on and I don't know why I experienced this, then I know other people are as well. And it was really scary for me. It was really scary for me to start the podcast because I was scared to put my opinions out there and to put my beliefs out there. But I also had this inner knowing that it was going to be good for me and that it was going to help me grow if I could do it. And so I just did it. I ripped the Band-Aid off and I started doing it. I didn't have a plan. I just went for it. And some of my episodes, I go back and I can just hear how scared I was and how I was trying to not really be my true self because there was still so much fear in there. But it's okay because I was able to work through it, and we're still going really strong with the podcast today. So then I went through another dark night of the soul. It wasn't as intense as my first one, but it was pretty depressing, and I fought against that for a little while. And as I was coming out of it, I just knew that I needed to go and get Reiki done. And I'd heard of Reiki before, and I'd been very interested in it, but at that time, I had not felt the calling to the right teacher. And so at this moment, I did. And I found the right Reiki master teacher, and I went and had my healing done. And it was just so incredible. I felt so much release. I felt so much more like myself and in alignment after that session that it was truly a life-changing experience. And not everyone experiences Reiki this way, but for me in this moment, it was incredible. And so I left there, and I was no longer in my dark night of the soul. I was just really feeling reconnected with my soul. And during the session, she had mentioned something when she was in my third eye, asking if I worked with people that were near death, like in hospice or in the hospital or with elderly people or anything like that. And I was like, no, and definitely not. And she said, well, I just keep seeing death around your third eye. And I thought that was interesting. And at that moment, I did think back to my childhood and me being interested in spooky stuff and being interested in death and that sort of thing. But I didn't really make the connection yet. And so a few weeks after that session, I just had this download that it was mediumship. It was mediumship that she was picking up on, and it was the fact that I've always had this connection to the other side, and I've always had this fascination with death, and that I needed to dive deeper into that. And so I signed up for a course, and I took some courses with Allison Shine to really tap into that, and I was a natural. All of the people in the class, they couldn't believe that this was my first time doing anything like this, that I had not had any prior instruction or experience. And I just got a lot of validation. If anything, if that class did anything for me, or workshop, if it did anything for me at all, it really helped me feel validated in my gifts and validated in my ability to be able to do this and to be able to connect to spirit. That was what I gained. It was very, very rewarding for me because there wasn't as much fear now to step forward and to say I'm a psychic medium and this is what I can do and this is who I can connect with. Where if I had not done that course, I would probably still not be doing readings for people. And the main thing that course really, really gave me was the validation, and that was from the practice circles. The practice circles is where I was able to really test my abilities in a safe place without fear of getting something wrong. And that's why when I decided to create the Chasing Spirituality community, that's why I want us to have a practice circle every single month, because it is just so rewarding and validating for so many people. And that's why I started offering them at the local shop, Sky, that I work at, because I want to help people. I want people to receive that same validation that I did. I want them to know that they can do this. Like, you are a medium. Go back and listen to that episode. You are a medium. It's just, you need practice, and you need that moment where you connect and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I got that right. And that's what practice circles give you, because there's not as much pressure as doing something one-on-one. and you're getting to work with people that you don't know. So you're like, there's no way I would know that their grandfather passed away of cancer. There's no way that I knew that their grandmother wore a apron with flowers on it, and you'll just get these little hits and these little things like that, and you'll just know what that means, and then you'll get the validation. And that's why that was so rewarding for me in that moment, because it was like a veil had been lifted from my eyes to say, look, you can do this. Stop being scared. Stop second guessing yourself. Stop being full of fear and doubt. Like, you got this. And that's what practice circles give you. So if you're interested in the Chasing Spirituality community, you can join the wait list for that. The wait list is on my website. The wait list is just you expressing interest so that I know you're interested in the community, where we will have practice circles and other things like that. So you can find out more about that on my website. But after that, I started practicing mediumship more. I started eventually giving readings to the public, doing psychic readings, which I've always been really in tune with my psychic abilities. Even when I did have my separation, I was still picking up psychic information. I just wasn't trusting that information. So I got to where I started trusting that more, and the validation through the circles really helped me understand that a little bit better as well. And then I got, I also got my Reiki level 1 attunement as well as my Reiki level 2 attunement, and started offering Reiki healings as well. And really just kept the podcast going, kept doing research, kept looking into things and expanding my knowledge. Started doing Akashic Record stuff, and now I also offer those to the public as well. We're still on the beginning stages of that, so the price is a limited price only until I kind of get the idea of how I want to structure my services around that. But for now, those readings are offered. That's one of my newest offerings. And I also found the local shop that I work at here, which is called Sky Apothecary. And that was an interesting experience all on its own. And I kind of just randomly found that place as well. So someone told me about that place, and I went to a couple of their events, and I really liked the vibe, but I didn't really feel an invitation or anything like to really connect to anyone or really put my services out there or, make any strong connections. But I did really like the vibe of the place. Well, then the last time that I went, before I started working out of there, I went to one of their events, and my friends that were there with me, they were like, tell her that you're a medium. Tell the shop owner that you're a medium. I was like, no, like, she's probably knows mediums. She probably doesn't need a medium. And they're like, just do it. Just do it. You never know. Put yourself out there. And I knew, like, I was scared. I knew that fear was holding me back, but it wasn't like intuition that was holding me back. Like, it was just my own fear. And so I was like, you know what? I'll do it. I will tell her that I'm a psychic medium, and that if she's interested in my services, to let me know, but not to make it weird. Just super brief. Hey, I'm Megan. I'm a psychic medium. If you are ever needing a medium for services for your events or anything, I saw you don't have one, let me know. Hit me up. And so I did it. I went up to her. I just kept it super short and brief, let her know. To be honest, I didn't really feel like she felt super, super interested. Not that she wasn't, just kind of like she didn't really have interest either way. But because, like I mentioned earlier, the universe always rewards you whenever you get out of your comfort zone and whenever you decide to face your fears. She had 3 people come into the shop that week asking for a psychic medium, and she had not had one ask in a long time. And for her, that was the sign that she needed. That was the nudge that she needed to reach out to me and say, hey, I know you said you're a psychic medium. Would you be willing to come in and do kind of like a practice session for me and the service providers so that we can basically vet you and make sure that you're legit? And so I was like, okay, sure. And I was scared. I was scared shitless. I was like, what if I go here and I try to do a reading and I just completely blow it? Like, no one comes through. It just sounds like I'm a fake, I'm a fraud, and I'm making stuff up. I was so scared, but I was like, you know what? It seems aligned. It seems like this is a direction I'm supposed to go in. It seems like this is supposed to happen. So I'm going to do it. And so I went in and I did practice on them, and it was fantastic. I made one of the shop owners cry because her grandmother came through, and it was a really beautiful experience. And apparently that was enough validation for everybody, because apparently she doesn't cry that much. And so now we have this joke where I'll look at her and I'll be like, look, I made you cry. So yeah, it's funny, but I would not have found that community had I not faced my fears and put my ego aside and just went for it. And working out of there has also been a huge part of my journey, because not only has that helped me grow and do more readings in person, but it's also allowed me to meet amazing people. And there's such a beautiful community there amongst the owners and the other providers, as well as the people that come there and support that shop. And some of them even listen to this podcast, and I've met so many great people and friends from that. And that's what I was looking for. Like, that was, at that moment, that's what I was looking for in my journey. I was looking for community. And I kept getting nudges that, hey, you're working on your online community and your online presence, but you need to do something local too. And I didn't know where to start or how to begin. So it kind of just presented itself to me. And that's the way the universe works. And so I really think that kind of covers most of my journey up into this point thus far, leaving out some of the some stories and some big details, but that covers all of the big things, and it kind of touches on my growth progress and the different things that I've decided to take further and get certifications in and that sort of stuff. So again, I just want to say thank you so much for being a listener, for being a supporter, for joining me every week with a new episode, and for listening to my voice 100 times. And I'm just truly so grateful for you. So go out, give me a review if you haven't done so already, and I will see you next time. Wait, before you go, I want to share how you can receive a free reading with me. Listeners of the podcast, if you go and leave me a review on Apple and then send me that review to chasingspirituality.com, you can get a chance to win a free reading of your choice. This can be psychic or mediumship. Once a month, I will choose one of the listeners to receive the reading. And I won't pull your name out of the drawing until you're chosen. This will help the podcast grow, but will also allow me to give back to my listeners. Hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you love. And it would mean so much to me if you could rate, review, and subscribe so that the podcast can reach and assist more people. Until next time, I'm sending you so much love.